May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome everybody to our KosherTorah Open Forum. In this, our beginning classes in the Hebrew Book of Enoch, 3rd Enoch. I'm, of course, your host, Ariel, part of Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. Well, I want to again welcome everybody for joining us. I see here we got people from at least 4 continents that I can see. Welcome to you people from the other side of the pond. For those of you in the Holy Land right now, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you guys. Good Lord, don't you ever sleep? You guys I can see in London and south of the border, north of the border. So welcome everybody. Do we have any Afrikaners here tonight? Not that I can see. I guess everybody's busy with the big funeral over there. But anyway, we are now in this second lesson of a book which is in English called the Hebrew Book of Enoch, or 3rd Enoch. In traditional Torah circles, it is called the Sefer Hekhalot, the Book of the Supernal Palaces. This book and the genre of literature which it represents is what we can honestly call the authentic, if you will, mystical Torah traditions. The original and authentic, what we call Sitre Torah, or the secrets of the Torah. This is the continuation of the prophetic tradition, the likes of which, good gosh, since Moses. We all have had prophets in the Bible. We're all familiar with biblical literature. And even though prophecy had ceased with the final prophets, that does not mean that spiritual contact at all ceased. In other words, a term you hear me referred to and use often at KosherTorah.com is living Torah. Torah Haim, the alive and living and vibrant and continuous Torah. For those who mistakenly understand the Torah as an academic pursuit, they're really disconnected from the authentic, original, living focus and source of what our Torah is all about. Those who follow such a simplistic, superficial path, in the words of Rabbi Chaim Vital, are following in the footsteps of the maidservant as opposed to the matron of the house. The shivha as opposed to the matronita. Now, let's put philosophy, theology, doctrine, put this all aside. The Hekhalot literature, the ascent literature, is about connections. It's about contact. And it transcends religion. In all due respect, if we ever want to talk about an actual and an authentic close encounter of the 3rd or 4th or 5th kinds, and yeah, there really are such things, this is it. This is astral projection and a record of the experience of the highest level. But that is what Merkabah practice, coming out of the prophetic traditions, biblical prophetic traditions, is all about. It's always been like this. This is not theoretical Kabbalah. When I use the term Kabbalah, I am specifically, unlike many of my peers, I refer to that as anything of the philosophical school that emanated from Spain and beyond, which includes all of Zoharic literature, all of Lurianic literature, and of course all of Hasidic literature, everything pretty much in the last 800 years. So, in that respect, what we have here is different from that. This is experiential, and that is philosophical. Now, just as a sidetrack for a moment, somebody here in text, good thing about being a live student here, you actually get to ask me questions that I can answer you. That's why we invite people. Does any of this have to do with the Akashic record? The Akashic record is a term used in occultic literature, New Age literature, which is said to be the universal record of all of mankind. Well, we're not necessarily talking about that here. Is there such a thing? The answer is yes. We don't call it by that term. We have a different term to refer to it. We're not referring to that here, but I do teach about those things in the classes from the Torah of Rabbi Chaim Vital and the teachings of the Arizal. In brief, what we call the Akashic records, if you will, is the collective consciousness of humanity. That is what Carl Jung refers to as the collective unconscious. When we tap into certain things at the collective level, it is, if you can navigate it, and that's really where the secret works come, can you navigate? You can access any thought, experience any image, any feeling, hear any word ever thought, felt, seen by anyone, anywhere in all of collective humanity, both pre-Adamic and post-Adamic. Yes, you can tap into the thoughts, the feelings, and the experiences of people who have not yet been born. Why? Because when we go into a realm which transcends space and time, we are accessing things in a completely different way. Most people are afraid of this type of talk, all the more so this type of experience. And a wise question again being asked in text. Can the mind handle such an infinite influx? It all depends on who you are and how well prepared you are. That is why, as we discussed in our previous class, what we call the ascending, he calls them here the gates, the sha'arim, all right, or the Hekhalot, the palaces. I've always referred to them as the doors, and referred to them as the 7 doors, with the old saying being the first door lies in the east, and it can be seen where it is not. Now, there's a lot of wisdom in that old statement for those who can understand it, because ultimately, remember, the path of the Merkabah, while it is an actual astral projection, the likes of which we discussed in our previous lesson, go listen there if you don't know what I'm talking about. The way to access astral projection is by going into the depths of the unconscious through meditation. In other words, the only way out is through within. And that is what people don't get. This is where people mess up. This is where people fail. Because they're not able to go in the right way and, if you will, ascend. This is why, in my opinion, the theoretical system of Rabbi Chaim Vital in his Otzrot Chaim, amongst others, when he talks about all these worlds and Partsufim, these aren't talking about the realms out there. They're talking about realms of consciousness within the human mind. This is not my revelation. The Baal Shem Tov himself discussed this it's referenced actually in the book Sefer Baal Shem Tov in the section Va'et Hanan, for those of you who want to go look it up. But anyway, my point is, I believe that the salvation of humanity, how's that for a grandiose plan? Is not to talk about God, not to argue about God, not to go forth with any kind of what, in my opinion, are moronic arguments. My religion is better than your religion. My way is better than your way. You're a secret idolater. You're an overt idolater. Oh, shut up. You know, these are like little children things that they would nag at each other on the play yard, right? That's not the way we mature, responsible adults are. You can sit and argue every day until the cows come home, as they say, about religion, about God, and this and that. You will never prove or disprove anything. All you can do is learn how to experience for yourself so that you can know and understand directly. That's what these classes are all about. That's what I've dedicated KosherTorah.com to be all about. I don't want you following me. I want you following God. And don't think, please, God's some little old man sitting on a cloud somewhere. For those of you who don't know, recently I was on a program on the History 2 channel called Ancient Aliens. It was Series 6, the lesson of the Secrets of the Lost Ark. And when they were talking about God, as you know, television editors, they try to be artistic. They showed a picture of what they present to be God, which made him look kind of like the Pope. And I sit there laughing, because even though you and I might say, "Oh, I know God doesn't look like that," but deep down within, many of us are not able to actually go beyond the limitations of our own mental prisons. We discussed something about that in our last class as well. We are now in Sefer Hekhalot, the Book of 3rd Enoch here, dealing with a very profound experiential revelation. This book is the source of so many of our later legends, what we call midrashim. Now please remember this about the Torah tradition. This is very important. Ancient Israel had numerous books and numerous teachings other than the written books of the Bible that we know. We all know the books of the Bible. We call our Jewish Bible. Christians call it the Old Testament. Nothing old about it. But why? Because it's old and new and living at all the same time. That's my intent. We've always had other teachings. Like many of the aboriginal nations of old, ancient Israel had a wealthy, healthy, and strong oral tradition. And many of those traditions, of course, were passed down through the generations, and many of them became embodied in our Talmudic tradition. And the oral traditions continued in other works like this one. And this book, in the writing of many of the teachings and the secrets herein, became the foundation of many things that we find later in the Talmud, in the traditional midrashic literature, and many other places. For those of you who are interested in that historical approach, the version of 3rd Enoch, which I use, of course, edited, translated by Hugo Odeberg, is available. You can purchase a hard copy on Amazon.com, please access through KosherTorah if you will, for less than $15. And I've even searched the web and I have found the Oldberg edition available online in PDF form. So for those of you who want to follow with the book, and if you're interested in some of the history, if you're interested in that pursuit, fine. You're not going to see me necessarily emphasizing those things. Again, this is not a history course. I want to teach you, in your very busy little lives, how to connect. And that is what this is all about. This is going to reveal to us many things about the relationships of, we use this term, angels. And anybody who knows anything in the biblical and Judaic tradition knows that the word angel means a messenger. Anybody could be God's messenger. The priest who served in the temple was God's messengers. The wind can be God's messengers. Anybody, anything could be God's messenger. So the word messenger, i.e. angel, means nothing. But yet, throughout biblical scripture and later, we have many words in the original Hebrew to describe these, in quote, angels. They're called hayot, or ophanim, or seraphim, translations of which are irrelevant. But what we are dealing with here is a very clear and definitive other races of extraterrestrial, meaning non-human, not of this earth, beings. Now, here's something very important to understand. It is today commonly accepted that God and the spiritual realms have no physical form whatsoever. It's all in quotes spiritual. Even though those who use such terms have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. Number one, that concept pretty much comes out of Maimonides. And Maimonides did not innovate this from the Torah. On the contrary, many accused him of contradicting the Torah by embracing such an attitude. And indeed, he took it from Greek philosophy. Many of the earlier sages, the Baalei Tosafot, the original Yordei Merkavah, many held that all of these entities indeed had some kind of tangible form. Notice I don't want to use the word physical, because we said that the forms of these entities were somehow energetic or energy-based. What is an energy-based life form? Gee, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I'm not a scientist. We are familiar with carbon-based life forms. We might be familiar with silicone-based life forms. What would we call a plasma-based life form? Would it even be life as we know it? And yet, this is the kind of life form, of an extraterrestrial life form, that apparently is really out there. Wherever out there is. We discussed in our previous lesson. Are we talking about other planets in outer space? There are those who will say yes. But even if we are talking about another planet, are we necessarily talking about a planet in this present dimension of experience? We could look at other planets as we perceive them today in our limited quantum outlook, and we see what we see. But if we were to see with different eyes or an expanded consciousness, those are what we call other dimensions. Indeed, maybe we would perceive the universe and life and everything else in different ways. So if I want to travel to one of these other places, how am I going to get there? Well, I can build a starship. We can always take the USS Enterprise and zoom off at warp speed and go where? To Aravot? Maybe. For those of you who are familiar with the Star Trek television program, the second series, I believe it was called The Next Generation, they introduced a character called Q. Q was this otherworld, almost godlike character who popped in and out from one place to the other. And he lived in a parallel dimension called the continuum. And it's interesting that they introduced parallel dimensional realities into a program in which the reality was already intergalactic. So you must understand, intergalactic is one level, interdimensional is another. When we astral project, we might be doing both. It doesn't matter. When we travel to a domain called Aravot, I was asked earlier in text, where is Aravot? Is it in one of the dimensional planes that is spoken of in later Kabbalistic literature? Asiyah, Yetzirah, and the like. And the answer is that every place has a representation at every level. So, if we are in this physical universe, there is a physical representation of Asiyah in what we would call, a physical representation of Aravot in Asiyah or in Malchut, as it is in every other shifting and higher dimensional plane. Rabbi Yishmael, the author of our material here, has ascended into a domain which is the domain which interacts with our world, which interacts with the domain of those who are called watchers. And here he is interacting with God and angels. Remember, we have many, many words for them, whose role it is to interact with us. Warning, warning, warning. Don't think that this interaction here is the whole picture of the entire universe or multiverse. It's not. It's dealing with us. It's dealing here. It's dealing with our reality. And I emphasize that to let you know there are multiple other realities. Many other realms. God just didn't create billions and billions of Ophanim and Seraphim because He has some kind of inflated ego that He wants to have a song and dance act before His throne all the time. Oh, praise you, praise you, praise you, la 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 la. What God's into song and dance? Are we so primitive to think that God is so human? No. We discussed also the issue of what real praise is all about last class. But now, Rabbi Ishmael has astrally projected himself. He has gone through the test of the gates. He now stands in the place called Aravot. And it is not some wide expanse which is just open. It's a domain. It's a place. He's in a location. And guess what? He ain't welcome there. He is a puny, mortal human. And he has no business being in Aravot. And his presence causes a major, major uproar. Now, let's ask the question. What's the problem? According to our primitive understanding, God created man in His image so they can have a man come up to heaven. Everybody should be singing around going, la 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 la, welcome, welcome, welcome. Kind of like, the Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz. Come on now. We're dealing with authentic and real extraterrestrial entities here, who from our measure of time have existed for billions of years. They are far more evolved than what we could understand. They are on a far higher level of everything than we could understand. And it shouldn't take any common sense at all to recognize they are much closer to God than we are. With all due respect, they're in the throne room, they're in heaven, we're on earth. I mean, is this rocket science? If they're closer to God, they're there for a reason. Now, to move on. Chapter 2. Rabbi Ishmael stands there. And he says, at that hour, the eagles of the Merkavah, the flaming Ophanim and the Seraphim of consuming fire, all of these entities, the Nesharim, the eagles. Why the eagles? Remember we had 4 animals of the Merkavah. What happened to the bulls? What happened to the lions? The eagles. Birds. What are birds related to? Well, modern science recognizes that birds are related to reptiles. Coincidence? Seraphim of consuming fire. The word seraph also has a reptilian nature. Yes, you understand where I'm going with this. One of the earlier and most ancient races are a very highly evolved race of what we would interpret to be reptilian entities. These are the ancient dragons. Maybe they're evolved dinosaurs. Who knows? These are the ones called the Teli, the masters, God's representatives. I am not going to reveal more of their secrets at this time. But these are the ones who are there. They are, if you will, in charge of things. And here they come. And they confront Metatron, which means the guardian, because he is Rabbi Ishmael's, if you will, escort through the domains. So these powerful entities, as extraterrestrial, as frightening as you can get. I can't even think of a horror or a science fiction movie in which they portrayed anything as frightening as what a real Ophan or a real Seraph would look like. They come and approach Metatron. Hi, how are you? Who's your friend? Not a chance. You got the book, read the words. They call him Na'ar. Hey, young one. Why young? We'll get to that. Why do you suffer one born of woman to to enter and behold the Merkavah. Who is this human who you have brought here? Huh? And they say, from what nation, from what tribe? What's his character like? What is this guy? What is he doing here? What's his business? Now, you might remember, as we're about to learn, Metatron himself was originally Enoch. Wasn't Enoch originally one of the human beings as well? And notice that the term Na'ar, as we will explain, is not what we will call a title of honor. I'm going to explain it to you before we conclude in this class. That's almost, as you're about to learn, is almost a derogatory term. Even though it's not understood as such, you will understand it as I proceed. There's still no Metatron, remember, he's their boss. They can't disrespect him. They got to obey him. And why? We'll get to in a minute too. And yet they still say, who is this guy? What is this human doing here? And he says, he's from the nation of Israel, who the Holy One, blessed be, chose from his people. From among the 70 tongues and nations from the tribe of Levi, whom he set aside as it says here, a contribution to his name from the seed of Aharon, who the Holy One, blessed be, he chose for his servant, put a crown of priesthood upon his head. And forthwith that they said, indeed is this one worthy to behold the Merkabah. And they said, happy is the people that is such the case. Ashrei am shekakalo. You see, they're aware of the plan. They understand what it means to be Israel. And don't you dare have an arrogant chauvinism to think because you are Israel, you're better than anyone else. Israel was not chosen by God to be better. On the contrary, they were chosen to be God's lightning rod, to be the source through which His hand would move on earth. And that's not always necessarily the most easiest, nicest, and comfortable job. Ask the people in the concentration camps. They'll tell you. That's chapter 2. Everyone is picking up and asking, who's this guy? And now, Rabbi Ishmael is going to turn to Metatron. We're going to actually digress from our narrative about his experiences around him to discuss the identity of Metatron. And it says, at that hour, I asked Metatron, the angel, the prince of the presence, Sarapanim, hey, what's your name? Remember, Metatron is not a name, it's a title. You can go into all kinds of sources to ask what the title means. All right, some say it means the protector, whatever, but it's not a holy name. It has become tradition in modern times to refer to Metatron as Memtet because they think the name is holy. Wrong! Don't waste your time. And what is his name? Bob? Hey, it's Enoch, right? No. He says, I have 70 names. It's only a symbolic number, corresponding to the 70 tongues of the world. And all of them are based upon the name Metatron, meaning guardian, angel of the presence. But my king calls me Na'ar, the young one, youth. This is probably one of the most profoundest teachings of our entire Torah. What is God's real name? The answer is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I will be what I will be. In other words, He has no name. He has no title. The word, the name Yud-Keh Vav-Keh that we all know so well, that is almost as if you will a formula, which means active being. I discussed that in my book called Upon My Name over 20 years ago. God has multiple names. What does that really mean? What it means is that each and every human being has their own interpretation and perception of God, which is unique to them within their cultural context and psychological orientation. And God connects to them through their own individual spoke of the wheel that connects to the source, even those names or spokes of the wheel which are idolatry. Did you hear what I just said? God connects to idolaters. Where do I get that from? Some book I read. What was it called again? Oh, that's right. The Bible. The book of Malachi in the first chapter. Wherein which it says, from the rising of the sun to the going down thereof, great is my name among the nations. And then it continues and says that even when they're offering an idolatrous sacrifice on the altar, God accepts it from them. Read the commentary by the classic commentator Rashi. And he'll tell you that. It's right there. God doesn't look to your theology. God looks to your heart, to the level of your decency. And that is why you can have those people who are, if you will, serving as part of Israel, who are Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Shinto, Taoist, go down the list of all the religions in the world. God has 70 names. Metatron has 70 names. God knows what we can call the mistakes of the intellect. God understands exactly how, if you will, dumb we are as humans. What we don't know, even though we believe. And that is why if we truly want to bring Mashiach, evolve the world, we have to go beyond what in later Kabbalah we call the klipot. The husks and shells that divide and get to the transcendent essence of them all. And that is why let people connect through the way they will connect. Once they're in the center, they'll understand. But as long as you're going to argue about the differences, you'll never get through the palaces. That's the truth of the matter. Metatron is known to every religion and every culture within the context of that religion and culture. God is known in every religion and every culture within the context of that culture. And that's just the way it is. That is a profound reality. So unlike all the other religions that say, you got to believe this way or we kill you, in Torah we say, you believe in that way which connects, and you know Metatron by that name which is unique to you in that in your language, in your culture, and you know God in that way which is unique to your language and your culture, and that is your path. And we have our path. And all the paths exist within the quantum greater reality, which none of us want to admit because we're so involved in our minor skirmishes of differences. Shame on us. God calls him Na'ar. Well, Rabbi Ishmael asks the next question, chapter 4. Why are you called by the name of your Creator by 70 names? Look, you're greater than all these princes. You're higher than all the angels. I can see you're above all the servants. You're honored of the mighty ones. Your greatness and glory. And you're so high. Why are they calling you youth? Na'ar. It's like a young man. It's like a teenager. And he says, because I am Enoch, the son of Jared. And the generation of the flood sinned and were confounded in their deeds, saying to God, depart from us, we desire not the knowledge of your ways. And the Holy One, blessed be, removed me from their midst, to be a witness against them in the high heavens to all the inhabitants of the world, that they may not say that the merciful one is cruel. Well, Enoch is Metatron. Well, anybody who knows anything about Enochian literature, go, I've known that. Oh, you do you? Well, let's discuss something. Because it is a Talmudic tradition of all things that states that Metatron was with God at the time of the creation. Now wait a second. How could Enoch, if he is Metatron, be with God prior to creation? And even that would obviously mean prior to Adam. So Enoch comes before Adam? That doesn't make sense. So how can you have a pre-existing Enoch, and a pre-existing Metatron, and then Enoch being a Metatron. Doesn't that sound contradictory? If you're looking at it from a simplistic point of view, I guess it might. But you can go into the traditional Talmudic commentary called the Tosafot. The rabbis of the Tosafot were the European rabbis, the French rabbis, who practiced this material, who practiced the path of the Merkabah. These are the rabbis who stood very firmly against Maimonides and his rationalist views of things. Unfortunately, they lost the argument. Very unfortunate as such. But anyway, they understood. And you'll read the Tosafot there that states that actually Metatron was indeed with God at the beginning. And that Enoch wasn't the only Metatron, but actually when he ascended above, he joined an already existing hive collective called Metatron. What is this hive collective called Metatron? In the beginning with God. In the beginning was God, and therefore was Metatron. This is so hard tradition. What does it say? That the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Torah, and Israel. Oh, Israel, yeah, I remember them. All one. What the heck does that mean? Well, what is Israel? Israel is, again, a symbolic term to refer to the level, or the higher levels, or the highest levels, of human souls. That's why I said you could have Israel technically from all the different nations and all the different religions of the world. Those who are the cream of the crop will rise and elevate to the top. You see, in the beginning, when God was emanating, if you will, reality, one of the first expressions of God was both Torah, His way, and an expression of God which we call humanity, collective man. When you go into Lurianic literature, teachings of Rabbi Chaim Vital, when he speaks about the creation and Adam in the Garden of Eden, he intersperses the terms referring to God in creation called Ze'er Anpin and Adam back and forth and forth and back. Because you see, the Adamic soul is an expression of God. That means every single human being alive has a connection, and a connection to the source. But now here's a big secret. So Enoch is going above. He's connecting to what? Didn't we say that that's Israel? Well, I thought Israel's like down here on earth. What's he doing up there? Who's up there then? Well, this is a very interesting little secret that is discussed by Rabbi Bacharach in his book Emek HaMelech, in the chapters on Olam HaYetzirah, in which he reveals that indeed the collective Metatron are the souls of collective Adam who chose not to fall with Adam, as we know from the story in the Garden of Eden. That actually there was a civil war in the collective Adamic race. And only part of it fell below. And the others stayed above. And are acting as the watchers to us below. And Enoch only came and ascended above to rejoin those who did not fall in the first place. He was the first to be fixed of those who fell. And therefore, Enoch, Metatron, became the guardian angel and the teacher who transmitted the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai. And there is a very involved tradition which goes back and forth in numerous literature. I have an entire essay on this on KosherTorah about the secret soul of the Messiah. And it was long held and believed that Enoch, as Metatron, would come back to earth and that he would be the Messiah. That's, it was based upon that concept that Christianity got the entire concept of their beliefs that Yeshu was somehow this entity. Not going to get into that right here and now. But understand the secret now of the Metatrons. They are the higher souls of the Adamic race. That means you and me. Each and every one of us has what we call a higher self. And when we tap into and connect to that higher self of us individually, that becomes our spiritual guide, our magid, a practice, a tradition observed by of all the greats in Israel. Rabbi Yosef Karo, the famous author of the Shulchan Aruch, channeled his guide. Spoke to him. We have a whole book about what those teachings were. If I'm not mistaken, the book's available in English. These things are real. These connections are real. A skeptic and an atheist might say, it's all in your head. Of course it's all in your head. All of reality is in your head. All of reality is nothing but an electronic or a neurological experience of something. But that's exactly what the reality of the world is. So Rabbi Yishmael is in this domain. And it is revealed to him now that his host is none other than Enoch, who God brought up to heaven to bear witness to the generation of the flood. Now, this caused a lot of problems. The higher existing Metatron race was already there, and Enoch now became one of them. Being that he was, as if you will, the newest boy on the block, who ascended above. All those other souls are there for our ancient times. He is now called the young one, or if you will, the latest edition, or in Hebrew, Na'ar. That's what God calls him, and that's why he calls him that. It's as if to say, you're the new boy, you're the newbie. That's Na'ar. Now that's a shocking revelation for Rabbi Yishmael, because what he is realizing is this: good Lord, if he can do it, so can I. I'm not dealing with entities who are just extraterrestrial, who have always been up here on whatever planet and dimension. I'm talking to one of us guys. We were actually able, notice I said we, meaning because Rabbi Ishmael's thinking himself too. We have what it takes to come above. Now Rabbi Ishmael at this time is in a position of astral projection. He's in his what we call Chalukah D'Rabbanan, or astral body. And therefore, in the image of all the entities, they don't see flesh and blood. There's no flesh and blood. They see this glowing, twinkly body of light. Kind of like, if you will, the body portrait of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the movies Star Wars. But yet, if he could say, gee, I wish I could stay here, well, that might be what we call death, and the body dies. No. Enoch never died. Enoch's physical flesh and blood body was taken to whatever realm, planet, or dimension, and was genetically altered. The text is going to say that his flesh and blood turned into fire, or maybe by our understanding, energy. How do we turn a carbon-based life form into a plasmic-based life form? How or what is the process for that to occur? I'm sorry, I'm not a scientist. I can't answer that question. But I will tell you, according to our record and how we understand it, that is exactly what happened. Now that's something very profound. When you want to talk about close encounters, when you want to talk about genetic or DNA changes, it's not the only time in which we've had genetic or DNA manipulation on the entire planet. During the flood of Noah, there were specific changes made in the Earth's atmosphere and environment. We find an echo of it in the Book of Genesis, where God says, I will no longer allow humanity or human beings to live more than 120 years. Well, what do you think happened? How did that change? There were changes maybe in cosmic waves, maybe in human DNA. I don't know the details. I don't know if anyone does. Where in which we were genetically altered through whatever influence from within or from without to, if you will, speed up the dying process. So ultimately, this is what we're dealing with here. God had a purpose to bring Enoch to Shemaim. He's joined Israel above, the Metatrons. And that's where he's at, but he's still the young boy on the block. He is there as an example, a role model, a witness for an entire generation that was corrupted. And mind you, the corruption of the fallen angels had not yet occurred. Enoch is taken up in Genesis 5. The sons of God, they don't come down until chapter 6. We'll learn about that in a little bit. Now, it says here about the generation of the flood. There are a couple of different versions. One of the others it's all the same which one we read. He says what they sinned all the multitudes, their wives, their sons, their daughters, their horses, and their mules, and their cattle, all their property, all the birds of the world, which the Holy and Blessed be destroyed from the world together with them, and all the waters of the flood. Alright? So none would say, though the generation of flood did sin, the beasts and the birds, what did they sin that they should perish? When the world existed in those times, the pre-flood time, nature itself was corrupted. There was genetic manipulations and changes in everything, therefore thwarting the path of the natural progression of the evolution of life as designed from above. Sound familiar? It should. The same thing's happening again today. That's why I fear for the world. But this is what was going on. Everything became corrupted. When you listen to legends of ancient days, about ancient Atlantis, this is the time. The Atlantean civilization, the real one, until now, existed both pre-Adamic and post-Adamic, and ultimately was destroyed by the flood. Not completely, because there were havens in inner earth. Not everybody was destroyed in the flood. Inner earth was not affected by the flood. Many of those on the surface did leave the planet. Just the way it is. Sources for that come from another place, but that's another story. So it says that at this time, for God to accomplish His purpose, He wanted to make sure that there was a witness from the earth. And He took the one individual who was able to reconnect. Because in those days, in the days of ancient Atlantis, because that's what we're talking about here, extraterrestrials, with everything that word means. Whether they were reptilians, whether they were humanoid, whether they were giants, whether they were in multiple forms, from inner earth and outer earth, everybody interacted and lived with one another. Not necessarily in peace. There really were giants 50 and 100 feet tall. There really were entities which were half human, half animals. There really were real extraterrestrials from Orion and the Pleiades, physical places, or Meroz, as it was referred to later in the Book of Judges. And, if you will, by intergalactic law, Earth, or the surface of the Earth, I should say, was placed in quarantine, subject to a very rigid, almost prison-like rule of who can interact when, where, why, and how. And we're in the midst of that to this very day. The only way of connection is this way, what we'll call the astral way. So now, continuing, it says, the Holy One, blessed be He, lifted me up in their lifetime before their eyes to be a witness against them to the future. And the Holy One, blessed be He, assigned me to be a prince and a ruler amongst the ministering angels. Because the Adamic race already was the highest of all the entities. I'm not going to get into the secrets of that. But now, at the time when Enoch ascends to heaven, It states here that 3 of the ministering angels, here called Uzzah, Azza, and Azael. Oh, we read about them as Azazel later in Leviticus. This is a famous source that we find from midrashic material. Here's the origins. These 3 entities came forth and brought charges against me, not against Rabbi Ishmael, but against Enoch, whose God is going to turn into Metatron. These angels, ministering angels, close to God. Remember, Azza, Uzzah, these are just titles. They're not their actual names. They objected. They said, Lord God, what are you doing? Just like they were challenging Metatron with Rabbi Ishmael's presence, they're challenging God over the presence of Enoch. They brought charges against me, Metatron, Enoch says, in the high heavens, saying before the Holy One, blessed be He. Said not the ancient ones, the first ones, rightly before you, do not create man? Old legends brought down that in the beginning God turned to the entities who were already there, the ancient ones. And, hey, do you think I should create man? What is that man? I thought we said man was there from the beginning. These ancient ones were Israel. The question that was being proposed is, do you think that we should materialize and manifest an expression of Israel into the lower planes so that they can reach into the lower dimensions and accomplish the divine purpose therein? The argument was, why bring them from all the way down there? They're from so high up, they're from a different dimensional place. Why don't we choose a level or race of beings who are closer to the physical plane, who could better deal with the circumstances they're in? If you think about it, their argument makes a lot of sense. But God overrode them. God had different plans. So the Holy One, blessed be He, answered and said to them, hey, I have made, and I will bear, yea, I will carry, and I will deliver. Quoting a verse from Isaiah. So as soon as they saw me, they said before Him, Lord of the universe, what is this one that He should ascend to the height of the heights? Who is this human, this Enoch, that you're bringing up here? We told you from the beginning, bad idea, that the Adamic souls should incarnate below, first astrally. Adam in the Garden of Eden, that was all astral in inner earth. They were thwarted in their plan by the original Atlantean priesthood, referred to in the Bible as the Nahash, the serpent, the Nahash, the enchanter. It's very possible that that enchanter represented a race of intelligent, humanoid reptilians. That's why he's called the serpent. But you notice something really weird about the serpent in the Garden of Eden. He's walking, and he's talking, and he's got eyes for Eve. When was the last time you talked to a snake? Go out to the pet store. They always have boas and other stuff. Go in and have a conversation with it. Go ask it what it thinks about Torah. So someone is saying, are the Teli the Atlanteans? No, the Teli came before the Atlanteans, but they were connected. They were all connected. I'm only allowed to reveal so much. Sorry. Okay, why? I don't know. Some little voice in my head, probably crazy voice, says to me, shut up, so I shut up. But anyway, Enoch himself is challenged. And he says, who is this? Is he not one of the sons of those who perished in the days of the flood? What's he doing in Rakia? Rakia means the heavens or the heights, but it very well might be the specific name of a place. At this time, Enoch was not brought up in an astral body. He's up there in flesh and blood. And if you will, possibly in a environmental protective bubble. Because in all due respect, I don't know what the atmosphere is on or in Ariel. I don't know what their gravitational field is like. I don't know. Could you go up there and breathe the air? Do they have air? Well, if you're in an astral body, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're in a physical body, those might be considerations you might want to consider before you go there. God's protecting him. That's the point. But this is part of the plan. Everything is part of the plan. Everything that's happening in modern day politics is part of the plan. There really is a plan for all humanity. The ultimate goal, of course, is what we call Mashiach, what we call the dawning of a complete new era of human evolution. And apparently this level of human evolution happens in stages. Kind of like, like the cream rising to the top. You take off the cream at the top. Well, it happens over and over and over and over again until you get it purely refined. We've been here before, and we will be here again. These are what we call the Shemitot, the sabbatical cycles, over and over. Why does God do things like that? Don't ask me. I'm not the one who has the plan. It's God's plan. But I can tell you that this is what it is. So again, we'll conclude here just in a minute. The Holy One, blessed be He, answered and said to them, "Hey, what are you that you enter and speak of my presence? Hey, who the heck are you? Why don't you go telling me my business? You see the seeds of a rebellion here. I delight in this one more than in all of you, and hence he's going to be the prince and ruler over you in the high heavens." So, forthwith all stood up and went to meet me, prostrated themselves before me, and said, "Happy are you, happy is your Father, for your Creator is favor. And because I was the small and the youth among them, in days and years and months, whatever, that's why they called me Nahar." So, somebody's asking a question here in text. What about the conspiracy theories of reptilians amongst us today? That's more fantasy and fairy tale. The reptilians of which I speak are energetic forms referred to in the Bible, Book of Isaiah, as the seraphim, or burning reptilian angels. Okay? They're not ones coming down here, the likes of the lunatics who write, "Oh yeah, they're our world leaders," and when they're not looking, they turn into reptiles and they eat people. You know something? People are telling stories like this have watched one too many science fiction or horror movies out of Hollywood. All right, with their ridiculous nonsense stories. Oh, and they'll of course accuse me of covering up things. Oh, shut up. Sometimes some people are just so dumb. But anyway, what can I say? Getting back to the issue here. Enoch's ascent to heaven was welcomed with the exception of, if you will, a group. And in our next class, we're going to get into that. Because if you remember in chapter 6 of Genesis, it speaks about the sons of God coming down. Well, the reason why they came down was because of an argument they had in heaven. They objected to the Adamic presence on earth, and they objected to the Adamic presence now coming back into Rakia. And as such, they wanted to prove God wrong. That's why they came down to earth, because they wanted to rectify the situation, thinking that they could do it better than the Adamites. Well, there are energy fields, wherein which when a soul, which is an energy entity, comes down into the earth plane, it is subject to levels and levels of energy, almost like pressure. Maybe like, if you will, like water pressure or something. It weighs on the soul and blurs, if you will, the psychic image and upsets the psychic frequency. And that's why so many people turn to evil. They're just lost. Well, an Adamic entity can handle this better than one of these other races. That's what God said at the beginning. But this other race said, no, we can do it. We're going to try it. But yet when they came here, they fell lower than the humans did. They corrupted themselves even worse. And yeah, they're still around. Their descendants are still around to this day, and they're the ones behind the real conspiracy theories. But that's another story for another time. But again, my point is that we want to understand the nature of actual ascent. Granted, in this class we did not discuss techniques, but I've hopefully given you enough background and information so that when you do practice techniques, You might see a golden reptilian hand extending to you. We discussed this in the last class. And I tell you, don't be afraid. Recognize and understand who they are. Recognize and understand that if you see a form that might otherwise frighten you, you must overcome your fears. You must be able to pass through the gates or the 7 doors, to know your way so that you can come to an objective experience of a greater reality, the doors of which are still open to this day. And again, I emphasize to you from the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, again, my motivation for teaching this, is that he, in his ascent to heaven, his ascent to the Rakia, the Baal Shem Tov lived in the 1700s, Rabbi Ishmael, this is actually pseudepigraphal, but that was probably in the 1st, 2nd century, so a difference of 1600 years between the two. But the message was that when we can start to do this, we can bring Mashiach. Meaning, we can evolve humanity to a higher level. Doesn't require everybody, but it requires each and every one of us who's able to do it. You don't have to be Jewish. Doesn't matter who you are, male or female. Doesn't matter the color of your skin, religion that you observe. Righteousness is what counts. Clarity, purification of the body, of the mind, to be able to ascend or descend as the case may be. That is what this Merkabah tradition is all about. And again, I emphasize, it is probably the oldest and most authentic expression of Torah and Judaism that there is. So on that note, let me conclude in this class. Thank you again all for joining me. I hope to see you all in our next class. Thanks again. God bless. Shalom. 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 Thanks again. God bless. Shalom.